Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive deep? Today we're tackling a fascinating idea. Genes, as important as they are, aren't quite the simple blueprint for life we often imagine them to be.
It's a really thought-provoking concept. We're so used to hearing DNA's the instruction manual for building an organism.
Yeah. So we're going to unpack this using some really cool research and insights from, well, experts like Denis Noble, who's an Oxford biologist, uh, challenging this whole traditional view of genes.
He really is. It's like paradigm shifting when you think about it. What if DNA is more like a starting point, like a set of possibilities, not a rigid blueprint?
Exactly. And a good place to begin, I think, is with the classic central dogma of biology: DNA to RNA to protein. That's the process, right? But it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. It's like looking at individual bricks when you're building a house, you know. You're not considering the architecture, the plumbing, the electrical systems, all those things that make it a functioning home.
100%. And that's where things get really interesting. Think about identical twins, right? They have the same DNA. So if genes were the whole story, they should be exactly alike.
Right.
But we know that's not true. Identical twins, they can have totally different personalities, different health issues, even physical differences.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where epigenetics comes into play. Genes can be switched on or off, or their activity can be kind of like dialed up or down. And it's all because of things in our environment and our experiences. And these changes, they don't change the DNA sequence itself,
Oh, interesting.
but they have a huge impact on how our genes are actually expressed.
So it's kind of like you have a cookbook
Right.
with all these recipes, but then someone comes along and starts adding notes, changing cooking times, substituting ingredients. You
Mm.
get a different dish,
Mm.
even though the recipe, like the base recipe, is still there.
That's a great analogy. And these notes, those are what we call epigenetic markers.
Right.
And they're influenced by, so many things. Diet, stress, exposure to like toxins, even social stuff can have an impact.
Wow. And what's even wilder is that some of these epigenetic changes, they can be passed on like to future generations.
It's like those notes in the cookbook. You're right. They're getting inherited along with the recipes.
Exactly.
It's a relatively new area of research, but it has really profound implications. It means what we do, the choices we make, the environment we live in might not just affect us. It could affect our kids, our grandkids.
So let's go back to this idea of genes as a blueprint. Dennis Noble, he really pushes back against this metaphor, right?
Yeah.
He says focusing only on sequencing genes is like it's like mistaking the pixels on a screen for the actual message in a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He makes a really great point with this example. Doctors, they don't diagnose people just by reading their DNA sequence, right? They look at symptoms, they do tests, consider the patient's history, their lifestyle, all of that. There's a higher level of organization at play. It's this complex interplay of factors that contribute to health and disease.
So Noble, he's done some really interesting research on the heart to kind of support this idea. He was studying this protein responsible for like 80% of the heart's rhythm.
Yeah, and you would think, right, that blocking this protein would just totally mess up the heart rate.
You think so?
But when they actually did the experiment, I mean, what they found was really, really surprising.
So they blocked the protein. They even knocked out the gene that codes for it and
Barely any change in the heart rate.
throw away.
The heart has like these built-in redundancies, backup systems that can kick in when one part of the system fails. It's exactly what Noble calls robustness, the organism's ability to like find workarounds.
That's incredible. So even at the level of a single organ, we're seeing that this relationship between genes and what they actually do
Mm.
is way more complex than we initially thought. Not just a simple one-to-one thing.
Absolutely. And this complexity becomes even more obvious when you look at the whole organism, right?
Right.
Noble points out that most of the big serious diseases like cancer, heart disease, they're what we call multifactorial, multiple genes interacting with each other, interacting with the environment.
It makes you think about the Human Genome Project and all the promises that came with it.
Right.
We mapped the human genome thinking, okay, we're going to find the gene for every disease, and then we can just target it and treat it.
Yeah, it's not that simple. Even the 2001 paper from the Human Genome Project itself kind of hints at this.
Oh, really?
Noble, he points out that it shows sections of proteins being like rearranged over time, which suggests it's more dynamic than just simple gradual mutations.
Hmm. That's interesting. So Are we talking about Lamarckian evolution here? The idea that like
Mhm.
acquired traits can be inherited? I thought that was debunked.
That's what we learned, right. But it might not be the whole story. Remember those extracellular vesicles we talked about?
Yeah.
Noble's research shows that cells, they release these tiny packages with DNA, RNA, proteins inside them. They act like messages between cells. And he suggests they might even be able to get to the germ cells, the ones that create sperm and eggs.
Wait, so you're saying like information from our bodies could potentially end up in our children's DNA. That changes everything we thought about inheritance.
It's definitely controversial, but the research is pushing the boundaries, and it raises a huge question. If organisms aren't just following this genetic script, are they actively shaping their own evolution?
That's That's mind-blowing, and it's something we'll definitely need to explore further. But for now, I think it's safe to say genes are not the simple blueprint for life we once believed.
Right.
It's much more complex. They're part of a dynamic system, always responding to and shaping its environment.
Okay, so if genes aren't this rigid blueprint, and there's all this interplay between our genes and our environment, what does it even mean for our health?
Well, I think it means we need to move past this find the gene, fix the disease idea.
Uh-huh.
That was so big after the Human Genome Project, remember?
Right.
But it's just not that simple.
Because as we've been saying, most diseases, especially the chronic ones, the ones we see as people age, those are multifactorial, right?
Exactly. It's not just one gene, it's a whole web of interactions between our genes, our lifestyle choices, the environment.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? If we can't just, target specific genes to fix things, how does this new understanding, how does it change how we approach, health and medicine? That's that's what's exciting. It opens up like whole new avenues for research, for treatment. Take epigenetics, for example.
Right. Those notes in the cookbook analogy, those changes that can affect how genes are expressed without even changing the DNA.
Exactly. And scientists are looking into ways to actually manipulate those markers. It's like fine-tuning how active our genes are, dialing them up or down to try to make us healthier.
So instead of trying to change the hardware, the DNA itself, we're figuring out how to reprogram the software.
Yeah.
The epigenetic instructions. That's incredible.
It is. And this has the potential to totally revolutionize how we treat so many things. Cancer, heart disease, even mental health disorders.
Wow. But what about prevention? Can we use this to prevent diseases in the first place?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most, I think, profound things about this research is that it really highlights how important lifestyle and environment are. What we eat, how much we move, how well we sleep, stress, even the air we breathe, all of these things can influence our genes.
And you said earlier that some of these epigenetic changes, they can be passed down to future generations, right?
Right. So the choices we're making now, the environment we're creating, it's not just impacting us. It could impact our kids, our grandkids. It's a powerful concept.
It really adds another layer to this idea of personal responsibility, doesn't it?
It does, but it's also empowering. It means we have more control over our health than maybe we thought. It's not just about the genes we inherit, it's about the choices we make, the environment we create.
Speaking of environment, this whole idea that organisms can influence their own evolution, that raises some really, really fascinating questions. You mentioned that the 2001 Human Genome Project paper, it showed sections of proteins that had been like rearranged over time, and that suggests a more dynamic process than just random mutations.
It's like organisms are participating in their own evolution in a way, not just passively waiting for mutations to happen.
Right.
There's a back and forth, a conversation almost between the organism and the environment, where changes in the environment can trigger changes in the organism, including changes at the genetic level.
So it's like the organism is testing things out, right?
Mhm.
Trying out different variations.
Yeah,
And if a variation is beneficial, it becomes part of the genetic code.
that's a great way to put it. It's this dynamic interplay between genes, organisms, and the environment that drives evolution.
But how long does it take for these changes to become like evolutionarily interesting?
Yeah.
If an organism is in an environment that changes temporarily, a temporary genetic response would make sense.
Hmm?
But if the change is permanent, wouldn't those temporary changes need to become like hardwired into the genome?
That's the key question. We need to see if these changes are actually sticking around for multiple generations, not just a quick blip. That's where long-term studies are so important. We need to track populations over time, see how their genes are changing, and how that relates to the pressures in their environment.
It reminds me of something Denis Noble said about how even temporary changes can be beneficial from an evolutionary standpoint. He compared DNA as a selfish replicator to the idea of particle spin in physics.
Yes. Both of those are metaphors, right? Helpful for understanding, but not meant to be taken literally. They can
Yeah.
they can kind of lead us astray if we forget that they're just models, not reality itself.
So he's saying that just as a particle doesn't actually spin, DNA might not be this self-contained, self-replicating thing we often picture it as.
Exactly. It's part of a larger system influenced by and responsive to its environment.
Which brings us back to this idea that organisms are actively shaping their own evolution.
Right. It's not just random mutations and natural selection. It's this dynamic interplay between genes, organisms, and the environment.
This making me rethink everything I thought I knew about evolution. It's not just about survival of the fittest, it's about this incredible dance between organisms and their environment. And that dance shapes the genetic code over time.
Exactly. And this new understanding has huge implications, not just for how we view evolution, but also for how we approach health and disease. It's a paradigm shift, really, opening up all these exciting possibilities for understanding ourselves and our place in the world.
This has been incredible. We've challenged this blueprint metaphor, explored epigenetics, and even talked about how organisms might be influencing their own evolution. But I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
There is. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll dig into some of the philosophical implications of all of this. Questions about free will, human enhancement, the future of our species.
We spent the last couple parts really getting into how genes aren't this simple blueprint. We've talked about epigenetics, the environment, how organisms might even influence their own evolution. It's got me thinking about like some big, almost philosophical stuff.
Yeah, I get that. It's natural to go there, right? And when you start to see how connected everything is, how our genes are always interacting with our experiences, it makes you question like who we are, how much control we actually have.
Exactly. Like if our genes are responding to the environment and the environment shaping our genes, where does that leave like free will?
Yeah.
Does this new understanding, does it mean we have less agency?
Well, that's a question philosophers have been wrestling with forever, long before we even knew about genes. But I actually think this new understanding, it doesn't take away from free will. It gives us a more nuanced way to look at it.
Okay, I'm curious how so?
Well, think about it. Free will isn't about like this absolute unlimited ability to choose whatever we want. It's not like we're in a vacuum making decisions without any influence. There are always things around us, inside us, that are shaping our thoughts, our feelings, our
So,
actions.
so you're saying our genes, our experiences, the environment, all of that, it all plays a role in who we are, how we make choices.
Exactly. But within that, within all those influences, there's still room for choice.
Yeah.
Free will, I think it's about being able to respond to those influences in a way that fits with our values, our goals, how we see the world.
So it's not being free from things influencing us. It's being free to choose how we respond to them.
Exactly. And that ability to choose to take our experiences and make meaning from them, to act in a way that's true to who we are, that's what makes us human. That's what gives us agency, even with all the limitations of our biology, our environment.
This is making me rethink this whole nature versus nurture thing. It's not one or the other, is it? It's more like this intricate dance between our genes and our experiences.
I love that, a dance. It's not about separating them, it's about understanding how they're woven together. Our genes give us the potential, the raw materials, but it's our experiences, our choices, the environment that shapes that potential into who we become.
It makes me think about those studies with identical twins. They have the same DNA, but their lives can be so different. Their personalities, their health.
It's amazing, right? And those studies really show the power of epigenetics. Even though they start with the same genes, their experiences create different those epigenetic markers, the notes in the cookbook.
Right. It's like they're both playing the same musical score, but each one is interpreting it in their own way based on what they've lived, the choices they've made.
I love that analogy. It really highlights that our genes aren't a strict blueprint. They're more like a dynamic score that can be played in so many different ways.
This whole conversation is making me like appreciate how complex life is. It's not about reducing everything down to just our genes. It's about seeing how they interact with the world around us and how that creates all this diversity and individuality.
Absolutely. And that understanding, I think, is so important for moving forward, both in how we deal with health and disease and how we handle the ethical questions that come with our growing ability to change our genes.
Yeah, those ethical questions are huge. Like with CRISPR, right? We can edit genes now,
Yeah.
not just for one person, but potentially for future generations. Where's the line between improving health and going too far, like creating designer babies?
Those are questions we all need to be talking about. The benefits of gene editing could be incredible, but the risks are serious too. We need to be careful, humble. We have to respect how complex life is.
It's like we're right on the edge of this new era
Hmm.
where we have the power to change what it means to be human. It's exciting and scary at the same time.
It really is. And it's on us to make sure we use this power wisely, ethically, for the good of all of us. We need to be having these conversations, thinking them through, and we need clear rules about how we use these technologies.
This whole deep dive has really been eye-opening. It's made me question what I thought I knew about genes, about evolution, even what it means to be human. I really appreciate this new way of seeing things, the connection between our genes and our experiences. It's incredible to think about the potential we all have.
I'm so glad to hear that the journey of discovery, it never really ends. It's through exploring, asking questions, being open to new ideas. That's how we keep learning, keep growing.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. To everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed exploring this fascinating world of genes and how our understanding of them is changing. Remember, genes aren't our destiny. They're a starting point, the beginning of a journey full of possibilities. Keep those brains buzzing and stay curious.